How's it going, everyone? Bryce Newberger with the Soul Ward. It is June 15th, Sunday, Father's Day. I am just having a at-home day, enjoying myself, drinking some coffee early in the morning. I want to record this video while my kids are still asleep, so that way we can enjoy our Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. Love your fathers, appreciate them. I'd also like to acknowledge all those people who don't have a father in their lives. My heart goes out to you. Or those who have father wounds, where maybe Father's Day is a time of hurt. So I want to acknowledge you guys as well, and say that I want to offer you just some stillness and some peace on a day that could be hard to process. But this video is going to be coming out tomorrow on Monday. So I hope you guys made it through that day. That being said, let's get into this video. Why I can't be agnostic, I don't know, isn't a neutral position. I was deeply inspired. I was deeply inspired by all of the atheists slash agnostics who showed up in the last 3 videos in the comment sections. And when I say that, I don't mean it tongue-in-cheek. I mean, I was literally inspired to create this video. I thought, I created why I can't be atheist. And I thought, this naturally leads me to why I can't be agnostic as well. And you might think agnosticism is the freest, least claim neutral position, and that's how it's treated. But in reality, it's not. So let me get into why agnosticism is not neutrality. Here's the thesis. While I don't know appears humble and non-committal, in practice, it often functions as a rhetorical shield and a philosophical position, one that refuses to engage foundational questions while implicitly adopting naturalistic assumptions. So when people say that they don't know, I just don't know, what they really mean is, I'm a naturalist, I'm an empiricist, and I just need more empirical data, but I don't have the data required to believe in God. Or to say that there isn't a God. But what that defaults to is naturalistic assumptions. So we'll get into why that's problematic. You might think, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But it actually, again, it is a positive claim, at least implicitly. So we'll get into that, all of it. So let me first introduce agnosticism historically. Let me move this up. There we go. Okay. Hopefully that works. All right. So the etymology and invention of agnosticism. So the term agnosticism was coined in 1869 by English biologist Thomas Huxley, sometimes called Darwin's bulldog for his advocacy of evolution. He formed the word from the Greek a, without, and gnosis, knowledge, without knowledge, to describe his philosophical position. Not that one disbelieves in God, but that one lacks sufficient knowledge to affirm or deny the existence of God or the metaphysical. I'm going to be drinking my coffee through this video. Huxley wrote, agnosticism is of the essence of science. Whether ancient or modern, it simply means that a man shall not say he knows or believes that which he has no scientific grounds for professing to know or believe. Hear that all the time. So he meant it not as a middle ground between belief and disbelief, though, and that's what people miss, but as a method, a demand for warranted belief. So let me fix my, I wanted to grab, there we go. I might have messed up my camera for the video. There we go. All right. So when this Huxleyism kind of came about, it wasn't a middle ground to say, it wasn't like, I just don't know. It was to say, if you want me to believe that, you got to give me evidence. And so people treat it as they can just live in this middle ground, but that's not really what Huxley meant as a place to just dwell forever. I will just dwell forever in Gnosticism. He was saying, I don't know whether God or not exists. Give me evidence to believe God exists. So he's saying, I'm going to remain in my naturalist assumptions until you prove otherwise. But he wasn't the first one. He wasn't the first one to kind of make this term hit the scene, or he was the first one to make the term hit the scene, but not the philosophy. So there are pre-Huxleyan agnosticism in some philosophical roots. Okay, so though the word is modern, Agnosticism in practice appears in several ancient and modern schools of philosophy. We have ancient skepticism, which is Pyrrhonism, founded by Pyrrho of Elis in 630 and 27 BCE, argued that we cannot know anything with certainty and therefore should suspend judgment. Epoch. Academic skepticism at Plato's Academy after Arcesilaus claimed that knowledge is impossible, especially about metaphysical matters like the gods. These were agnostic in name, but not in principle. These were not agnostic in name, but they were in principle. So, I got that backwards. They questioned whether humans could even know the truth about divine or ultimate realities. So, we have ancient skepticism, which was a pre-form of agnosticism, though they still believed in gods. They believed it was impossible to know everything about the gods. Buddhist philosophy, I like this one a lot. Some schools of early Buddhism, particularly the Theravada tradition, refrain from metaphysical speculation about the soul, God, or the afterlife. This is called the noble silence. The Buddha often refuses to answer metaphysical questions, believing they led to suffering and were irrelevant to the path of liberation. I like the idea of there is this Buddhist proverb where one is asking the Buddha to explain the universe. And one teacher who was previously wiser or considered wiser than him kind of gave his best explanation of the universe. Excuse me. And Buddha remained quiet. And it was like, therefore, Buddha won because he did not speak. He had the noble silence. And so the way to explain the universe is to not speak on the universe. So that's a fun little Buddhist philosophy that kind of overlays. You wouldn't expect to see that here in a Western sense of agnosticism, but it's got some overlap. And then we've got David Hume, 1777, 1776. Hume was skeptical of religious claims, arguing that miracles and metaphysical claims cannot be reasonably believed without extraordinary evidence. While not an agnostic by name, because the term didn't exist yet, his empiricism and skepticism deeply influenced modern agnostic thought. So Hume can be a sort of forefather to agnosticism. Now we start getting into the philosophical tradition of agnosticism itself. So, although agnosticism isn't a full school of philosophy in the sense of having a comprehensive worldview like Stoicism or Existentialism, it informs and overlaps with several important traditions. Okay, so logical positivism, logical positivism, 20th century. They dismissed metaphysical claims as meaningless unless they could be empirically verified. We have empiricism. Hume, Locke, Ayer insist that knowledge must be grounded in sensory experience or observable phenomena. Secular humanism and scientific naturalism, often agnostic in stance, these outlooks withhold belief in the supernatural due to lack of evidence, which is really all of those are very similar to empiricism. They all need empirical evidence. So in the modern world, by the early 20th century, agnosticism had become a widely recognized philosophical and cultural stance, particularly among scientists, academics, and skeptics who wished to separate themselves from both theism and atheism. It is often seen as the cautious or humble position, but as we'll explore, that humility can sometimes mask a de facto metaphysical bias, and that's totally what I've been running into in my comment sections with atheists and agnostics who were the last few videos have been all about metaphysics, and I've been getting them masking de facto metaphysical biases and then weaving in empiricism and scientism into their claims. So I want to be specific though. Which agnosticism do I refuse? So which one of these am I debunking? I want to avoid people saying, well, that's not my agnosticism. Now, I never really avoid that. Every video when I mentioned atheist, I mentioned what kind of atheist I was debating or refuting. So the first one I said by atheist, I mean closed system materialistic naturalists. And then I got a bunch of atheists being like, that's not real, or I'm not that. And it's like, great, okay, then what are we talking about? Because this is what I'm talking about. And then in postmodern atheism, I pointed out postmodern philosophy as it's interwoven into modern day atheism. And now I can't not see it. And again, I got people being like, that's not my atheism. Now, it's funny because as we discussed, they did all the postmodern maneuvers to the point where they never accepted the term of postmodernism, but they displayed it. And that is actually what a postmodernist would do. They don't like to be defined. Which agnosticism do I refute? Philosophical agnosticism, Huxley's original formulation, is the position that we cannot know whether God exists. I refute that. I'm refuting that one here. Also, pragmatic agnosticism says, I don't know, and live as if it doesn't matter. Epistemic humility says, I don't know, but I'm open and seeking agmatic agnosticism. I don't know, and I don't care. So, these are the ones that I'm kind of fighting against. Now, I want to affirm epistemic humility. I don't know yet, but I'm open, okay? So I would refute pragmatic agnosticism and philosophical agnosticism. Pragmatic is going to say, so Huxley's we can never know, and pragmatic agnosticism, which says, I don't know, and I live as if it doesn't matter. I don't know, and I don't care, right? So, right, that's kind of, and I said in one of my comments, the enemy of Christianity is not atheism, it's apathy. And a lot of times, apathy becomes a claim to agnosticism. Well, why? What do you believe? I'm agnostic. It's become the comfortable thing to say in awkward religious conversations, which is fair. Someone's like, I don't really want to explain my beliefs. I really don't care about searching these things. I'm not here to throw rocks at you, but I am here to call that what it is. Apathy, right? So what I would say is what I find untenable is not honest doubt or epistemic humility, but the version of agnosticism that pretends you can withhold commitment while continuing to live a full, value-laden life. Okay, so if you're not going to explore the deeper rationale behind meaning or justice or love or virtues, that's fine. You can live that life, but don't pretend you have the high ground. And this is what I get in my comment sections. I'll create a video on some sort of virtue, and someone will be like, "Oh, like, you know, you Christians don't blah, blah, blah." And when you press them on this, they're like, well, I don't know. I'm agnostic. Okay, well, stop claiming to have the metaphysical high ground, the value-laden high ground when you haven't even explored your own beliefs. So this is why I push back. But more importantly, I think I'm looking at why can I personally not be agnostic? Why can't I live in the realm of I don't know and wear that as my theology? Why do I have to be a certain theist? So I can't be agnostic for three main reasons, okay? Implicit commitments, agnosticism is unlivable, and the psychology of cognitive commitment, okay? These are three main reasons why I cannot be agnostic, okay? Implicit commitments, agnosticism is unlivable, and the psychology of cognitive commitment. Let's get into some of these. So first, the implicit commitments in everyday life, all right? Here's the key idea. We live according to answers we've never verbalized, right? So even those who have never asked life's big questions still operate every day on assumptions that reflect specific worldview commitments. This is functional metaphysics. No one is truly neutral. We all carry and live by assumptions about reality. So I like to take people through, James W. Sire's 8 worldview questions. I've done this with Jungian shadow work people. I've done this with atheists my favorite guy came out of the Mormon tradition, and then he was like, all religion's a lie. I was like, cool, I really want to hear you answer these questions. Done it with a Wiccan. I've done it with agnostics. I've done it with tons of people. I love these 8 worldview questions. There are things like what is real, like the really real, like what is the purpose of history, that kind of thing. A lot of them are like, I've never thought of these questions. And I'm like, that's okay. The reality is you have lived your life with an answer to all 8 of these questions. You just never verbalized them. But just because you didn't know the question or haven't heard the question or haven't said the answer out loud or thought consciously out loud of the question doesn't mean that you didn't have an answer. These 8 questions that Sire came up with, you have to live within the context of your belief system, and you really can't escape it, whether you're aware of it or not. And so we have these implicit commitments in our everyday life, the way you treat other people, the way you treat yourself, the way you rise in the morning, the way you go to sleep in the morning, what you call a good day, what you call a bad day. All of these are implicit commitments, okay? So The idea is rooted in presuppositional and existentialist philosophy. So James Sire in The Universe Next Door, he argues that every person holds a worldview, consciously or not, and their behavior reflects those beliefs. That's what I was just talking about. Charles Taylor in Sources of Self, he claims that modern identity is shaped by implicit moral frameworks, often inherited from culture. And so Søren Kierkegaard warns that the aesthetic life that avoids commitment yet still functions on hidden existential choices. And so I really enjoyed Kierkegaard on that, but he's talking about, your life is aesthetically operating. It visibly operates, but it actually has hidden existential choices that you're making. Again, how you wake up in the morning, how you go to sleep at night, how do you work, right? Like what makes, a lot of times when I was working in the corporate side of things, and I worked my way up through like management and stuff like that. And I went from being, shoulder to shoulder with certain employees to being a trainer above employees to being able to hire and fire employees. So I went through all of that. You began to see that some people just have inherent commitments to the workplace, and it changes with their work ethic. So all of them, this is not like this is not philosophical or religious ground. It was a lived metric of choice. And so as they chose, this is how their lives unfolded. And they weren't really conscious of making all these choices. And so Martin Heidegger, in Being in Time, he introduces thrownness. So we are thrown into a world with assumptions already at work, which shape how we engage reality. And so not all these guys are Christian. And that's again, why atheists and theists can get in trouble, because we engage on a field where we're still arguing about the paper, right? So it's like we want to argue about what to draw on the paper when we're still trying to pick out like what form of medium we're working with. Is it a sculpture? Is it a paper? Is it a painting? Is it a watercolor? What's going on here? So these are all pre-theist, right? We're talking about life choices. So implicit commitments in everyday life. Continuing on. Even agnostics or skeptics live out answers to questions like what is real, what is good, what is the purpose of life, what happens when we die. They may say, I don't know, but their lives are structured as if certain answers are true. So again, I can't emphasize this enough. When your answer is, I don't know, like what's real? I don't know. What's good? I don't know. What's the purpose of life? I don't know. What happens when you die? I don't know. But you're going to structure your life around subconsciously what you inherently accept as real, what you inherently accept as good, what you inherently accept as the purpose for your day, right? Or the trajectory of your being towards the end of your life. And for a lot of people, the question of death and the afterlife weighs heavily. What happens when my heart stops beating, right? Am I just dirt food? What goes on there? even if you never answer that question, you're going to make certain decisions in life based on that. I see this with a lot of agnostic people. I don't know if there's a God, but I've lived a good life, so I hope I make it in when the time comes. So you can refuse to articulate your worldview, but you cannot avoid living in one. You can refuse to articulate your worldview, but you cannot avoid living in one. And that's why that's what literally leads us into agnosticism is unlivable. Okay, so I think true agnosticism is not a livable life. I don't think you can live in agnosticism. So, key idea. Existential agnosticism is not neutral. Life forces our hand. Even without certainty, we are constantly making decisions that reveal underlying metaphysical commitments. We are always wagering. This is Blaise Pascal from his Pensies. You must wager. It is not optional. You are already committed. Pascal's wager in its softer form is not about proving God. It's about highlighting the inescapability of existential choice. We're always wagering. You're wagering on things. When you get a job, you are wagering that that's going to be a good job, right? When you buy a car, you're wagering that that's going to be a good car. When you get in a relationship, you're wagering that this will be a good relationship, right? When you have children, you are wagering that you're going to make a good parent, right? For those of us who actually planned the pregnancy. And so the second point for this one is agnosticism being unlivable. Let's break it down. Put me here. Philosophical foundations. Okay, Blaise, Pascal, and Pensies. He argues that we are all on the field. Our choices are already bets, even if we claim neutrality. So it's funny. It makes me think of the movie We Were Soldiers, where Barry Pepper's character is just a war reporter in Vietnam. and they're getting attacked. And Sam, forget his last name, but the older grizzled veteran throws him a rifle, and he's like, "I'm a non-combatant." He's like, "There's no such thing today, boy." Uh, we're all on the field. We're all in battle. You can't be neutral in life. You have to make commitments. Your body assumes commitments just to live every day. So agnosticism, in its truest sense of refusing, thinking things are impossible to know, or aside from epistemic humility, right, which we're going back to, well, I'm doing things that I'm unaware of. Now that's fair. I'm doing things I'm unaware of. Now that's fair. But agnosticism as a worldview falls apart. So Søren Kierkegaard critiques the aesthetic life. Those who avoid commitment still live out choices that shape their souls. William James, in The Will to Believe, argues that forced momentous decisions must be made under uncertainty. Commitment is unavoidable. Okay, so I want you to hear that one more time. Forced momentous decisions must be made under uncertainty. And that's true. They must be made under uncertainty. Now, some people could say, but that's what I mean by agnosticism. Well, that's fine, but that's epistemic humility. You're admitting to making choices. You're admitting that you have background, metaphysics, existential beliefs. You hold them. You might not understand them, but you do hold them. It's not that they don't exist. And you're making decisions within that uncertainty. So every non-choice is a form of existential inertia, but inertia still takes you somewhere. Even drifting implies a current, right? You can't stay still. You're either moving forward or you're falling behind, is what I used to hear people say to me all the time. So there's this existential tension. To refuse to decide about God, truth, or meaning is still to live as if some stance is true. To love someone assumes meaning and value. To act ethically assumes moral reality. To grieve assumes something was lost, right? So here's the big takeaway for this one. Neutrality in worldview is a myth. Every act is a wager. Okay, neutrality in worldview is a myth. You're not actually neutral. Every time you act out, you cause something, you do something, you are wagering on that action, on that cause. So what are you wagering on? And you might not define it. You might not want to explore and articulate it, but it exists within you. And so you are not truly agnostic. There is a commitment behind the scenes that you're working with. Now, you could be naive to it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So the last one is the psychology of cognitive commitment. No is a vote. Okay, so this is the myth of non-commitment. So the psychology of cognitive commitment. And this is actually where I would press someone like Alex O'Connor on his free will determinism, his no free will determinism. I've watched a lot of people engage Alex in on the philosophical field. Alex is fine within his philosophy. I think it's internally coherent. It does fall apart at some points, but I'm not here to critique that. That's a whole nother video. Because internally it does fall in upon itself, and that's why Alex has to appeal to mystery so many times, because it's internally incoherent. But again, what they really need to push Alex on anytime someone confronts him on free will is not on the philosophical ground, it's on the psychological ground. Okay, so psychologically, what do we have proof that we are making choices? And this is where we actually get into cognitive commitment. So put me up here. No is a vote. Key idea. Agnosticism often presents itself as neutral or undecided, but in practice, no functions as directional commitment, shaping life's choices, behavior, and worldview by default. A prime example is Libet's experiment. Libet was this guy who was exploring whether or not we are conscious of our decisions. And his experiment can be used to argue against free will. But the reality is that Libet, while he questioned free will, he did not question free won't. He said, even if we're not actively, if I say raise your hand and flex your wrist, and you raise your hand and flex your wrist, he says, okay, your brain actually did it before your body actually did all that before your brain consciously came up with a narrative behind it. And so therefore free will is an illusion, right? Well, he says there's still plenty of time for free won't, which is someone says, raise your hand and flex your wrist. And I say, no. I will not. And so I free won'ted, right? And so, and that's not to say Libet understood everything perfectly. I think the problem Libet ran into was he was in one field of psychology, specifically behavioral psychology or cognitive development. And so that one narrow scope within the broad field of psychology, you could get to maybe some deterministic, like plausibility. But when you view the full breadth of psychological study, it doesn't lend itself there. And so you have to be very narrow to prove what you're trying to say. And that just excludes data and isn't a good experiment. But anyways, agnosticism often presents itself as neutralist or undecided, but in practice, no functions as directional commitment, shaping life choices, behavior, and worldview by default. The free won't, right? So epistemology and psychology bridge. Decision theory. Right? Inaction is a decision. Every refusal to choose still has consequences. That's Tversky and Kahneman. CBT and behavioral psychology. Avoidance is an active behavior. Choosing not to act or think is still a reinforcement loop. This is what I do in like life coaching. Is I deal with a lot of people who are frozen in their choices, and that's that is a defense mechanism, and it's called avoidance, which is an active behavior, and we have to work through avoidance. I deal with avoidance every day. Existential philosophy. Freedom is always a burden. We are condemned to choose. This is from Sartre. So we have this cognitive commitment that is baked into psychology. Let's put me down here. There we go. All right. So the core argument: to say I don't know is to live and live without God is to functionally live as though God does not exist. Listen to that. To say I don't know and live without God is to functionally live as though God does not exist. Or, like I said, there's other people who say, I don't know, but I'm going to try and live a good life and hope I get in when I die. Well, they're living as if God does exist. They're making good choices to yield themselves leverage in the afterlife. Now, I would say you really want to know what kind of negotiation you're getting in, because Christians would say it's not based on your works, it's based on your faith. But anyways, but that's a metaphysical commitment. Agnosticism as lifestyle becomes de facto naturalism. In the absence of intentional metaphysical investigation, most agnostics live by the dominant secular plausibility. They live by the dominant secular plausibility structures, what Charles Taylor calls the immanent frame. Okay, so this doesn't mean every agnostic is a naturalist in theory, but that their default operating system often mirrors it. So they're going to have ethics grounded in consensus or utility. They're going to have purpose found in experience or personal narrative. Reality is interpreted through scientific naturalism. So that's not to say everyone falls into this, but these are saying that is often mirrored these things. So when someone says, I don't believe in God, but I don't not believe in God, I'm agnostic. And then, well, what is your grounding for ethics? Well, consensus and utility. I am nice to people because they are nice back to me. I can utilize it, right? If I act out in certain ways, my society rejects me. So consensus is against bad behavior. So purpose found in experience or personal narrative. Well, these choices made sense in the past. I'm going to keep making them. So all of these are contingent. All of these are based on a background assumption. And so you operate on those. And so you have a cognitive commitment that you cannot avoid. I hope I'm being clear. The psychology of cognitive commitment. All right, so last point on this one, just a few extra closing points on this one. James Sire, The Universe Next Door, argues that everyone has a worldview, even if they've never articulated it, okay? James Taylor describes the immanent frame. Modernity pushes belief into private silence, defaulting to secular norms. Martin Heidegger, human beings are thrown into existence and must take up a stance. To refuse is itself a stance. Albert Camus, when the decision not to commit is a choice about how one faces the absurd, right? The myth of Sisyphus. One must assume Sisyphus was happy. So even if you choose not to commit, you have to still face the absurdity of life, right? You have to go up and go to work every day, and you got to make a decision on how you feel about that. The takeaway. Agnosticism functions less like a pause and more like a placeholder, one that defaults to secular assumptions unless intentionally resisted. And this is not all agnostics. Please keep in mind, not all agnostics. But what I run into a lot in the comments and the type that I cannot ascribe to is a pause more than a placeholder. So they say, or it's what it does is it's going to default to a secular worldview, a naturalistic worldview. And I would say no is a vote. Neutrality is a mask. All lives are lived on a wagered premise. All right. So let's talk about how agnosticism functions as a placeholder, but often defaults to naturalism. And this is a big piece that I've been hitting at here today. So 5 quick points: the illusion of neutrality, I don't know as a rhetorical strategy, the postmodern move, the philosophical trap, and neutrality requires work. Okay. So these are quicker than the previous ones. Here we go. Put me there. The illusion of neutrality. I don't know. Sounds like it avoids bias, but neutrality requires equal scrutiny of all possible foundations. So you have to be equally scrutinized. So this is what I ran into with my last. I ran into this guy called Critical Thinker, and he was willing to use postmodern deconstruction tools on theism, but not on atheism. And so it came across like he was claiming to be agnostic. He wouldn't. He said he was an atheist, but it could come across like agnosticism. But the reality is he's only scrutinous of theistic claims, not atheistic ones. And so in practice, most who say, I don't know, default to naturalistic or atheistic frameworks without interrogating them. This is not epistemic humility, right? And that's what I champion. If you want to say, I just don't know yet, that's fine. But this is metaphysical evasion. They were holding on to naturalistic claims and not grappling with metaphysical grounding. And so, and even calling it useless or arbitrary. And so you can't just say, I don't know, and stop. You must still live, love, grieve, choose. That means you are living as if something is true, right? So I don't know is not a bench. It's a moving sidewalk. If you're not walking, you're still being carried somewhere. All right. So I don't know is a rhetorical strategy. I don't know as a rhetorical strategy. Shifts burden of proof without taking responsibility for counterposition. All right. So I don't know can be used in a debate as a strategy to say, well, so like I make a claim, like I challenge a claim. I would say, I don't think atheism is livable. And so what I'm doing is I want atheism to put forth its proofs to me, and I've explored them. And that's what I've been doing. I don't think it's livable. And here's the proofs of why it's not livable. And I said, well, I don't know. Prove to me theism. And I got this a lot. Make a proof for theism. Well, that's not what why are you shifting the burden to me? We're not talking about theism. I'm talking about atheism. No, we can get to theism later, but a lot of times it's not just theism, because I would rather talk about metaphysics before theism. Why would we talk about theism if you have no love of metaphysics or place for metaphysics in your worldview? That makes no sense. But a lot of times it's defend your Christian God. I feel like Vikings. Thank your Christian God for me. Defend your Christian God. When we haven't even made room in your worldview for theism or metaphysics. So like shifting the burden to Christianity is just not the right time or place. It gets the argument backwards. Gains rhetorical high ground while resisting logical implication, ergo the Klom argument, contingency, or moral grounding. So this is a way to make theists look dogmatic while appearing reasonable. So that's your dogma. But the reality is we're not questioning the theistic dogma that we can. I even told the guy deconstruction with postmodern deconstruction is valuable. And I referenced the quote, after all, one does not imprison Voltaire. I think it's important to have our beliefs challenged and stress test. The problem was I was challenging and stress testing atheism in my last video, specifically postmodern atheism, off the back of metaphysical atheism or closed system materialistic natural atheism. And he wanted to just deconstruct theism without ever deconstructing atheism. And so what he says is, I can take apart your beliefs, but you're not allowed to take apart mine. And that means my beliefs can be stress tested, but yours cannot. I need to just accept your beliefs. And I have a problem with that. And everyone should have a problem with that. I've even told kids as a youth pastor, I preached a sermon on belief. And I said, if you believe something because your parents told you or because your pastor said it, and this was me as the pastor, I said, that's a dumb reason to believe something. This comes from my sermon, Know Better, and I think it's still online. Though I was much younger there and not as wise, I still had some sort of wisdom to say that just to believe something because your parents say it or your pastor said it is not a good reason to believe. I challenge the students to own their beliefs. And so there's holy work to be done there. The postmodern move. deconstructs claim without offering constructive alternatives. And this is what I've been talking about. So, and this is what I can do when I can be guilty of this. If I deconstruct agnosticism and I don't present any other constructive alternative, then I'm not really moving towards knowledge. Now, we can film a video on one thing and deconstruct it as that one thing. And that's fine for commentary on a video or on a belief or philosophy. But I can't live there. I can't just stop. I deconstructed something. My mind has to build something, and it will build something, whether I consciously do it or not. So this dismisses metaphysical language as speculative, but silently adopts metaphysical assumptions, materialism, causality, reason. And so this is a worldview. You still have a worldview. It's just an unstated one. So when I start presenting theism and then you deconstruct theism, which you're not wrong to do, but when you live your life within that deconstruction and claim agnosticism as a worldview, or as your belief that I'm agnostic and I'm just going to live here. Well, the problem is you have a worldview. You're just not stating it. It's an unstated one. So you've deconstructed something else, but not grappled with your own. And my point is, going back to, that's unlivable. You really can't stay there. The philosophical trap. I don't know doesn't stop the need for metaphysical grounding. It just avoids choosing. So it feels not like an act of choice, but subconsciously it's there. And I think Alex O'Connor would agree with me on this one. Not in the choice, but in the determinism of it all. You have to go somewhere. But not choosing is a choice. It means that the person operates functionally as a skeptical naturalist, even if they deny the label. You can't live in I don't know. You either act as if there's a foundation or disintegrate into relativism or nihilism. And that's what I got to in the two forms of agnosticism. Right? One side says, I don't know, but I'm going to live as if there's a foundation. I don't know, but I'm going to hope that I get into heaven if there is one. I don't know, and therefore I'm not going to believe in God. Right? So you haven't really, it's not a neutral ground. There's a sharp line in there's a dichotomy there. And that's not between God and Satan or God and not God, theism and atheism. That's just in metaphysical grounding versus naturalistic process. So neutrality requires work. I don't think I can hide my face here. Can I? Boom. There we go. Okay, so neutrality requires work. This is my final point. Cognitive load theory, Sweller and Kahneman, the brain resists indefinite suspension. It seeks pattern, closure, and reduced cognitive dissonance. So people who claim neutrality often create mental shortcuts, heuristics, to ease ambiguity. And those heuristics tend to reflect cultural defaults, scientific materialism in the West. So in the West, so you say, I don't know, but your brain can't live in suspension. You're a pattern-seeking creature. Your mind craves closure and to deduce. And so it's very hard to live without a deduction because you're just not designed. Your brain is not made to do that. So the takeaway, neutrality is unstable without training. The brain will default to what feels safest or most familiar. And I'd go back to cognitive behavioral therapy, avoidance behavior. In cognitive behavioral terms, non-commitment is often avoidance, a tactic to manage anxiety around belief, uncertainty, or social risk. People may claim neutrality not out of epistemic virtue, but to avoid conflict, to avoid internal responsibility, to avoid the dissonance of partial belief. So the key insight here is I don't know is often a defense mechanism, not a carefully cultivated intellectual stance. In fact, it's almost an action to not have one. You can't live there. Your brain won't let you. So you almost have to continually delude yourself into thinking that you haven't chosen or that you're living without commitment when you inherently are committing. So closing thoughts. Here's my last thought on this. Hey, I'm doing good on time. Doubt is not a position. It's a place you pass through on the way to somewhere else. Staying there forever is not honest caution. It's a refusal to look deeper. Okay. So doubt's not a position. It's a place you pass through on the way to somewhere else. All right. So you can say, I doubt that. Well, you are somewhere. You're somewhere cognitively. You get an idea, and you're like, I don't know if I believe that idea. And at the end of that disbelief or that doubt, you will either arrive at a new position or circle back to the position you already held. But you can't live here. So the refusal to choose is itself a choice. And in philosophy, every choice has consequences. G.K. Chesterton, paraphrased, of course. So that's why I can't be agnostic. Ultimately, for those three main reasons, I don't think agnosticism is real. I don't. You have implicit commitments, and to try and live as if you've not made a choice is itself a deluded fantasy. You have choices. Your brain makes those choices. They're all in there. You can't ignore them. Every act is a wager. Every breath that you take, every movement you make. Ooh, we're getting into like some romantic songs here. I've been watching you. No, but everything's a wager, right? So you are wagering on all of your actions. And so the psychology of cognitive commitment is you have to commit. Your brain makes commitments. And so even like Libet's experiments doesn't disprove free will, because he still has the idea of the free won't, to saying no to something, and no is a choice. Real quick, I want to get into some predicting objections. This is just for me, for fun. You can stop the video here, but I'm going to call out the comments I'm going to get and my objections to them because I'm cheeky. So predicting objections. You're just rebranding faith as certainty. Likely critique that I'm going to get in the comments is that I'm just, I assume that functional commitment equals knowledge or justified belief, and that's a leap. Well, here's what they're really saying. They want to disconnect epistemology from existential action, and that doesn't really work. So I would clarify that functional metaphysics does not equal certainty, but that existential integrity requires coherence. So I'm not saying that we need certainty to live. I'm saying we already live as if certain things are true. So let's interrogate what those things are and whether they're consistent. So again, don't invoke God when we're not there yet, right? I'm not rebranding faith. Yes, I'm a Christian. Yes, I have that. I'm not telling you should be a Christian because I can't be agnostic. That's not what I'm here to do. This is not a good argument to be Christian. It's not. This is a good argument not to be agnostic, or to refute even the idea that agnosticism is a true claim, is a true worldview. So this is not an argument for Christianity. So no, I'm not rebranding faith as certainty. The slippery postmodern dodge. Okay. I'll likely get comments that will say all knowledge is contingent anyways. Everyone's worldview is just a language game. Translation, they're trying to collapse the ladder I'm climbing up by calling it all a language game. But my response, what I would lead into Charles Taylor and Alistair McIntyre, who says if that's true, then your claim itself is just another language game. So why should anyone take it seriously? The reality, even postmodern deconstruction still assumes meaning, intelligibility, and a shared world. You can't use reason to undermine reason without borrowing its authority. Okay, so you can't really collapse the ladder I'm walking up. You're going to try. It's a postmodern dodge, but it's not going to work. I'm also going to get comments that are going to say the real agnosticism defense. I've already preempted this, but I'm going to get it anyways. I always do. I preempted it with materialistic naturalist. I preempted it with postmodernism, and I get the comments anyways. Likely critique. You're not talking about my kind of agnosticism. Mine is humble, open-ended, and intellectually honest. They'll shift definitions mid-discussion to protect themselves. But the response is, I would reiterate that in my video, I affirm epistemic humility. What I'm critiquing is existential neutrality. It's impossible for you to say you're attacking a straw man because I've already distinguished between multiple kinds of agnosticism and called out the ones I'm talking about. So either respond that I am talking about the ones I'm talking about, or if you're like, well, you're not talking about one, that's fine. Then I'm not. That's what I said I was. I said I wasn't. Answer. So I would say if you're actively open, interrogating both sides, and living with intentional tension, then I'm not talking about you. But many people say that's what they're doing while living as practical naturalists, and that's really my concern. They're going to psychologize me, right? I got a guy in the last video who said, you should call the line. I deleted his argument. If you leave rude comments, they're going to get deleted. I know I get pushback for that, but my comment section is not a place for hate. That goes to Christians, theists, anyone alike. If anyone comes in, oh, atheists are just stupid, deluded idiots, I'm going to delete your comment as well. But they're going to psychologize me. Likely critique, you're just uncomfortable with ambiguity or uncertainty. Translation, they'll make my argument about my personality instead of my logic, right? An ad hominem attack. So I'm going to turn the mirror. Right? Avoidance of commitment is also a psychological state. I'm not arguing for dogmatism. I'm arguing that everyone's psychology is shaped by their implicit metaphysics, and pretending to avoid belief doesn't free you from that. So this is where I bring back the cognitive load theory and avoidance behavior. I would say my argument is less anxious, not more. So owning your metaphysical commitments is actually less psychologically taxing than trying to live without any. All right. Two more objections. The burden of proof shift. This is another one we're going to get. Likely critique. I don't have to prove anything. I'm just withholding belief. Well, This is, again, what we talked about, the rhetorical high ground. So they want the rhetorical high ground without the intellectual cost of having it. My response is, but your life still runs on some foundation. You don't get to use moral language, truth claims, or existential meaning without borrowing from a worldview. I'm not asking you to prove God. I'm asking what you're using to fund your daily decisions and whether that bank account is solvent. Basically, you're not neutral. You're just not admitting which team you're playing for. Semantic precision policing. Another likely critique, that's not what agnosticism means. It just means lack of knowledge. We're totally going to get this one. Translation, they want to reduce the conversation to dictionary definitions to avoid existential pressure. My response is that may be how the word is defined, but I'm analyzing how the lifestyle of agnosticism tends to function. Language is more than a static label. It's a lived framework. So how does your form of agnosticism shape your moral life? Your sense of purpose, your daily choices. That's where the real definition shows itself. And my final prediction is the most common reaction will not be a direct rebuttal. It will be, you're overcomplicating a simple I don't know. And that's a shield. This video exposes this as an illusion. I don't know is never just an intellectual. I don't know is never just intellectual. It's existential. It has consequences. So I expect deflections, but I want you to know this, okay? People who say this are avoiding my conclusion because they don't want to accept my premise that to live is to wager. And that is why I cannot be agnostic. Guys, I hope this has been fun for you, as fun as it is for me. Enjoy. I hope you had a great Father's Day. And you will see this video tomorrow on Monday. All right, bye, y'all.